Hello, everybody. This is Bruce from Printavo, Simple Shop Management Software. We've got another business lessons and learnings podcast episode today. Have a very special guest with us, Monty Mims from SanMar. Hey, Monty.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So, tell us first a little bit about your role. What are you doing at SanMar? What are you working on?
My current role for almost exactly a year now is part of a fairly new group and division called Decorator Relations. It's a new division, but really started 7-8 years ago by our channel manager and lead, Mark Bailey, who was tasked to, kind of multi-part approach, but identify, organize, and begin a collaboration effort with contract decorators nationwide, as well as begin to collaborate with many leaders throughout the industry, from a Wolflex to an M&R and so forth, essentially crossing the aisle at all these trade shows we go to. We felt like there was a good strength and value into connecting, making those connections, understanding who the key contacts are, and bridging that gap, reaching out and talking to these guys more as we both have shared accounts.
So would you say it's a lot of a consulting type of role, or is it matching what SanMar offers to what the print shop needs?
I think it's both. Our sales team as a whole at SanMar is one of the rare ones that has no commission structure to it, inside or outside sales. Our outside folks are called territory managers, to add to that distinction. But 45 years of grooming that culture has led to a lot of our customer base looking at our reps, both internally and externally, as consultants. That's certainly what we strive for, is that trusted advisor role. And we get a lot of questions asked, looking to get into direct-to-garment printing. What have you seen out there that's been successful? What would you recommend? We just relocated and need to build back up a contract decorating network. Who do you know in the area, kind of thing. So Mark Bailey started that. I'm the third outside guy. Rich Jacobs came after Mark, joined his team. I was added middle of last year, and then we've taken on a fourth member, Jason Murphy, who's a wonderfully valued asset as well.
Got it. Very cool. So you guys are dealing with shops. How many shops would you say you deal with, let's say, a month?
Well, our account base now that we're actually visiting, is upwards of, we probably have identified somewhere in the ballpark of 600 or 700 contract decorators nationwide. And then we try to travel, at minimum every other week throughout our different chunks of the country. So I have Eastern time zone. Rich Jacobs has sort of the central core of the country, and Jason Murphy's West Coast. And so we're out there meeting with contract decorators as a focal base, but all shapes and sizes, big guys, little guys, continuing to learn from them, and we're building profiles for each one of them that feed into a database that we can then pull from when we get certain requests.
Very cool. What would you say, this just popped up in my head, but what would you say is the biggest issue that you see repeatedly between contract decorators? That you're like, you guys got to stop doing this, or?
Sure. Contract decorating, as I've understood it, and I've been on both ends of using and certainly working with contract decorators, it's a low front-end margin business model. And so where you have to make your money is through time and efficiency. And there's still a lot of contract decorators out there who aren't as efficient as they could be. The maximizing of time, and in my opinion, utilization of the proper technology and processes. The world isn't such now that you can replace everything with technology, but you can certainly gain a lot of benefits from it. So there's still a lot of, even some of the biggest guys I've met with, still using stuff just straight paper trail, stacks of paper, triplicate copy stuff everywhere.
Wow.
And I myself, how I came to find out about Printavo and meet you was taking on my own little personal study course of all the different software and system companies in our industry. And I bring that knowledge and experience of studying that and continuing to keep up with some of those leaders like yourself and Printavo to see who's actually getting it and who has real world tangible application that these guys, even some of the old curmudgeons, if they have a simple system, they can utilize it to improve the efficiency.
Interesting. So even some of the big guys are still using, and then we see that
some
a
of the
lot
biggest,
too. Or paper, or whiteboard,
Yeah, I tell people all the time. I said, listen, I know that guy, that 600-pound gorilla that your competitor down the street, you're fearful of and think he's doing everything right. Well, you'd be surprised. They are definitely not optimized, is how I best put it. And I get my batteries charged. After leaving a big shop that maybe is still stuck in their ways, I go walk into another shop that's run by some 20 or 30 somethings. They're using Printavo or something like that. They've got tablet stations. They've got their processes are all labeled and identified, and you can just tell they are dialed in, man. I walk out of there feeling hopeful about the next generation for this industry.
Interesting. Do you see that, and I don't want to obviously make this an age thing, but do you see that as more so the shops that have just been around for, say, 20 years are the ones that are in their existing process and are kind of stuck there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the adage goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of people, I think, lean on that heavily, and we do it in our personal lives and professional lives. I mean, I think any person can talk about their experience with introducing their dad to an iPhone, or parents to something new with technology.
Sure.
But I think the key and the secret to it, because I get labeled by coworkers all the time, like, "Oh, you're such a tech nerd," or kind of a geeky moniker. And I tell people, I said, listen, I've seen what tech nerds really look like, and there's guys that tech out just to tech. There's guys that get the newest toys or the newest thing just to get it. And really my core mantra is I am an efficiency nut. And so that's boded well for this role. And I look for technology that truly does optimize and make things more efficient. It's partly what drew me to continue to follow along on the Printavo story, is I like the way you're handling this solution. So yeah, as much as you try to affect change with some of these guys, sometimes there's some meetings when I can quickly gather there's maybe a lost cause scenario, and I have to kind of politely smile and nod and gracefully bow out from some of those conversations of technology.
Interesting. And you've been involved in the apparel industry for quite a while. I know you tweet a lot at Apparel Geek on Twitter, and your family, you grew up in an embroidery business. Just talk a little bit about that, the different experiences you've had.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like to joke. I've been around the industry for my whole life, and I've been active in it for 17 years. My dad, who's probably 73 now, he was an early guy onto the scene. Even dating back into the 70s, there was a pretty common business model for direct-to-consumer retail of the transfer shops. So whether it was a hotspot like Daytona Beach or even a mall, you'd go in and there'd be racks of blank garments and glittery transfers all over the wall, and you'd say, I want Dukes of Hazzard on the royal blue cotton t-shirt, and they'd press it for you and send you on your way.
Yeah.
He opened up the business model in 1981, and very early on moved into a place that was right next to a guy who's still in business to this day that does contract screen printing. So I think from his perspective, he gravitated towards embroidery, utilizing a contract decorating network for screen print, and probably hit his peak in the late 90s, and then through various reasons trickled the business down. But even through mid-80s through mid-90s, I believe, he was also co-owner in a trade show registration company, and their primary client was ISS shows. So for a good 10-year plus block, he was traveling the country with all the regulars, guys like Charlie Tobley and such. Know my dad from the old school days. And if you had asked me 15 years ago, or when I was working with him, if I was still be doing this, I'd probably say no. But I had about a 7-year stretch of working with him, and the latter 5 of those years were from 2001-ish towards the middle end of 2000s. Became buddies with my SanMar rep, and he got me an interview. And then I moved to Jacksonville to be an outside rep, or what we call territory manager, from about '07 until just about a year ago. So
what would you say, because that's pretty cool, so what would you say is the same and different from 20 or so years ago being in the industry till today? And it could be anything.
Sure. Well, I think one of the obvious things is there's certainly been a strong consolidation of suppliers. When we started, we were being in Florida, we were using Broder and a little bit at Alpha and Virginia Tees, and now through various acquisitions, the strata of, call it the top 10, broad-based apparel suppliers has certainly shrunk. And conversely, SanMar, who, founded by Marty Lott, has always been a family-owned, family-driven business. I think one of our strongest attributes is our attachment to the industry, and our culture that listens, learns, and adapts our business model to our customer base, as opposed to coming up with ideas that we think maybe are what people want and implementing them, and then maybe taking a few years to figure out that wasn't the right strategy. It's a company that not only I'm feeling very fortunate to work for, but plan to retire with, and it's at that common core that is kept me around and kept me passionate for doing this.
What about the actual printing industry side? So the suppliers,
Sure.
A lot of them consolidated.
Yeah.
What about everything was so different then, right? There was barely, internet wasn't even a huge thing yet. So there's no Yelp, there's no Facebook, there's no.
Yeah, I think
there's a little bit of email.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think there's been a big boom and probably a bit of deflation in an extent in the last 10 years, especially with the online e-commerce model. Pioneers like Custom Ink and Teespring and such certainly changed the landscape for how to reach an audience. Again, it's a visible, tangible sign of technology working within the industry. I joke our industry is in many ways a bit slow and pokey. I married a super smart, savvy corporate woman, and she works for a huge company, and you hear about a lot of the things that they're doing and features and processes they use that it feels like our industry is still a few years away from. But I like that. I think we get to take our time and do things the right way. So e-commerce has affected things, but I talk to some people that are paranoid and extremely fearful of mega giants like Amazon creeping into this space.
Yeah, I saw that newest patent that they put out for fulfilling.
Yeah, and while I think there's the place for that, and I think it's good. Some people feel like it's going to dry up everybody's business, and I would disagree. I think one of the charming aspects of the industry that I love is people do business with people, and so I don't think the internet will ever replace that. There's a lot of efficiency and optimization of the commerce experience that are good, but I think if the small, medium, and even large-sized businesses take from that and adopt that and add that to their regimen, people want to go, touch, and feel. People want to try on. People want to shake someone's hand, and I've seen, if anything, a little bit of a resurgence of sort of old-school, back-to-basics salesmanship in lieu of everybody kind of disconnected.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I mean, that's what we focus on too, is a lot of person to person. I think you try to automate as much as possible from an efficiency perspective, and things that you're doing that's repetitive over and over. But especially when just chatting with people and helping with people, just getting on the phone and just doing things that aren't scalable, really help us too. What would you say is something that you miss about how the print shop was ran, back when you were working with your family?
Well, do you ask that question speaking like as a global change, or is it like something I enjoyed doing back then?
Back then, more of like a nostalgic type of thing.
Okay. Being in a small business, and I think any employee or owner will tell you this, there's very few regimented, defined roles. So when I worked with my dad, he was on the tail end of his business boom. I was coming back as being that kind of youthful injection. And it's been fun meeting other similar models. I think that's not too uncommon. You know, we're in an era now where a 25-year-old is often back living with their parents, right? So if they have a business that needs help, they're often living and working with mom or dad. And, you know, we had two production operators. We had an aging out salesperson. We had one admin, and then me and my dad. So I was literally given the book of biz that he had accumulated over years of calling and dealing with different accounts. I started with sort of an initiative to cold call, but I think one of the things I really started to click and connect with was when we did start. I know this sounds like a little business horn toot, but when we did start working with SanMar, one of the captivating things was they had free custom websites and thus kind of web stores. And so rather than cold calling businesses all over the country, which I didn't mind doing, I really enjoyed sort of learning about the power of a web store. And this is 12 years ago, so think about that in its infancy. And so we started converting over schools where we were doing, say, staff uniform shirts from old handwritten, can't read Sally's credit card number.
Store.
Yeah, remember the day people would write their credit card information?
Oh, they still do that.
Triplicate. Yeah,
they still talk to shops where they say they have to mail in a piece of paper.
Terrible security measures back then. But the idea of taking that chaotic mess, which had so much labor involved and mishaps, and I thought you wrote that instead of this, converting that into a web store. Even as, you know, again, 12 years ago, SanMar's system was fairly basic, but also very accomplished in what it could be done with it. And that became kind of a snowball effect for us. We built our first one, used that to sell the second one, used that to sell the third one. And 4 or 5 web stores deep, we were going, who else can we get to fit into this model? So I miss the creative side, and I miss that application of these tools. Now I just get to talk about them, but certainly brought that shared experience into my roles at SanMar.
Yeah. I think some of the younger guys, and I was thinking about this, you know, as we talk about 15 or so, 20 years back, some of the younger guys, myself included, haven't, especially running a print shop, haven't experienced a downturn yet in the economy.
Sure. Yeah.
Whether, 90s, 2000s, 08, what was that like? I mean, you've seen a couple. What was that like in the printing industry?
Yeah, I may have kind of been around it because I graduated in 01, and so there was a bit of a slump post 9/11. The really crazier part, though, was going from the working for Pentance for Dad in 07. I started with SanMar literally in February of 2007, and certainly we're putting on my big boy pants as far as getting my first real career job. Working for Dad was great, but didn't feel it. 401k, what is that? So it was a very strange time to dive in and then immediately get smacked in the face with 08, 9, and 10. It was strange. I was doing better than I ever have. SanMar was actually doing great. We were growing. We were adding employees on all fronts. I feel like we were the tortoise of the tortoise and hare race, and our kind of fiscal, conservative, slow, calculated approach paid off in those 3 years of a slump. But here's what I also learned during that time. The industry as a whole, which, you got to bring in all aspects, fairly recession-proof. I heard some interesting statistics around that time of because there's counterbalances. So, team and athletic stuff may be down, but corporate's up. Or in that case, maybe during that time, corporate had taken a big hit, but people were still getting uniforms and stuff for their kids to play sports. Different various aspects of the industry would have a surge. So I think the stat I heard was basically the industry at its worst was flat back through the Carter administration during really overall bad economic downturns. Things found a way to sort of counterbalance. So again, I think that should be a wonderful feeling for all of us that have chosen this as our career path. Not maybe being in the flashiest, sizzling, crazy of industries, but also feeling a little bit more safe and comfort if things do take another dip.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason I think about it is, of course, everyone, if you do follow financial markets and so on, everyone's like, oh, we're overdue, and
right.
And obviously not every shop is handling big corporate accounts in a large city. There's small town shops that are handling small towns, and of course those are probably hit a lot harder than more metro located businesses. With that said, that's interesting that you say that, especially more about SanMar in focusing on longer, slower growth and more stable growth, because I'm assuming they probably, this is a total assumption, but may not be as debt driven, like growth off debt and leasing things and things like that, and more off of just natural revenue and their growth. Which is, of course, something to consider with any business, along with the 100 other factors. Yeah.
I mean, I think the things that makes sense there, especially if there is a downturn, is diversification. I mean, that's key. If you've got too many eggs in one basket, that's a red flag there. So, the accounts that I've saw, during that time, I really only saw maybe a handful of businesses that went belly up.
Sure.
And each one you could trace back some of those common parameters. I think always running on the razor edge of debt failure was one of those attributes. The guys that were just getting by the seat of their pants. Things slow down, they go belly up. This industry is fairly self-sustaining, so a lot of people get complacent, frankly, with the phone always ringing, the emails always filling in, and people walking in the door. And I've met many an owner that have been in it 5, 10, 15 years, truly don't grasp a lot of the fundamentals of sales and marketing because they were in a good place, they had some connections, they were sociable and charming, and that was able to kick the business off and keep it running. But yeah, don't over leverage and keep a diverse portfolio, and you're probably going to get along just fine.
How do you, let's say there's a shop out there, they've got, their contract shop, or even not a contract shop, but they've got a couple big clients like you're saying. How do you go about diversification? What are the maybe 1, 2, 3s of starting to do that or planning for that?
Well, one of the fundamentals I always lean on is go with what you know. And so, hopefully you've got enough employees where you can draw from their experience as well, even if they're not in a traditional sales role. But rather than trying to quickly read up, and study a completely unfamiliar industry, everybody's got a past, everybody's got a resume. And so I like digging into that kind of history and talking to some of your employees about, hey, what have you done? What do you know about that? What are their wants and needs? And starting that as a very root basis. And so if you haven't ever tapped into, like, say, home service markets, like landscaping and security and different things where it's a huge market for people that have to wear logoed product. But maybe one of your employees does, or better yet, one of your actual sales reps used to do that. So they have an understanding there. And some of that stuff, you have an understanding because you've been a user of that. And so just chatting up the guy that comes to do your pest control and asking them about what they do. So if you've got a couple of strong points maybe in the school and team market, but don't have some kind of other blue collar service markets or corporate, see in your immediate vicinity who does have some experience and sit down with them, have a frank conversation, and learn from that. And I feel like once you do get a couple of those channels figured out, then build off of that. Again, don't try to stop the motivation you've got going and completely switch gears. Kind of like in my web store example, use your first success story to sell the second one and then build off of that.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's I think those are good tips. Definitely. It's always like the always be selling type model. And I heard this interesting quote or maybe it was a blog post, but they were talking about when someone starts the business and they're really grinding hard and they're tapping every single channel they possibly can, and then versus the kind of 4 or 5 years down the road, it's like, are you still doing that? Are you still like grinding and pushing as hard as possible? And usually the case is probably not as hard as you were doing it before.
No.
And then looking at that and saying, why aren't I? Like, I need to be, if, this is what I do, and we print shirts or embroider hats or anything like that, why aren't we still reaching out to every single person and saying, hey, remember me, we do this. Can we help you guys? Do you guys need
Yeah.
anything? Things like that.
I think there's a push and pull dynamic where, I kind of look at businesses a lot of times coming from doing some restaurant hospitality business through college, sort of front of the house, back of the house, right? So I've always heard from my accounts talk about this concept and seen it in my personal experiences where it's like you want to go sell, but you also got to maintain the internal architecture or back of the house, the production, the processes to support that. So I think people go through that push and pull dynamic where maybe they hire a rep, or I always recommend, I've heard a lot of business owners share with me their angst and frustration and bad history with hiring reps. And one of my responses to them is always, you're never going to get a great rep. Very few and far between. What you need to focus on is getting some people internally to support your back of the house and your infrastructure, and you need to be out there. You're always going to be your best salesperson. You need to free up your inside process time and get out there and go sell yourself, because you know your facts, you know how you've got the passion. So I think it's a push and pull. I think people jump on that spark, but then they get so busy that they immediately retreat back and realize production's behind and things are getting jammed up. And then maybe they build that up or improve some things. They add a Printavo to the system, and that gives them the comfort to feel like they got to go back out. But you're right. Some people end up kind of getting trapped in the inner workings and don't get out as much as they'd like or feel like they need to.
Yeah. We just had Printovation Conf, our first annual conference, and we had tons of people come. And
Good.
We had a bunch of speakers, and we had 2 or so were actually just people in sales. And we had a lot of questions about that. And some of the definitive takeaways were definitely trying to measure the salespeople more numerically, and just understanding that, anyone can say that they're a salesperson because the barrier to entry is so low.
Right.
So the hiring process of rating someone based on these different scales of what you think a successful salesperson should be, and vetting those people very strictly before you're bringing them in. And then after that, making sure that they are completely enabled and feel extremely comfortable to be able to go and get it. And constantly iterating on that too. Like, hey, how can I help you? Like, how can I make this easier? Where are you stuck?
Yeah. It's a challenge. And one thing I've observed in my time in this industry is how brilliant, smart, savvy, even deep-pocketed experts from other industries have come into our industry in various shapes and forms, whether it's ownership of a major supplier, somebody starting completely brand new, and they just go, T-shirts, how hard can it be? Killer margins. I love the numbers. Let's do this. And they flounder and flop bad. And I have to kind of snicker and smile, because I think they come in with a sort of disrespect or discredit to what we do. And there's a lot of nuances and trickiness, and it's not as easy as it looks like on the pamphlet. Start your own T-shirt business or apparel business, and it's just printing money basically. And again, they may have been titans of industry in other areas, but and that's why, again, people freak out about Amazon. They're going to be good at certain things. They're going to do terrible in other things. I don't care if they got deep pockets and Bezos at the head. They're screwing stuff up, I guarantee it. So this is a quirky, charming, remarkable world that we're in, and it's got its nuances that take some time to learn.
Speaking of which, because I think a lot of print shops think about Amazon fulfillment, and someone could just go there just like they go to Custom Ink, which, Custom Ink's been around for a little while now too. But what do the suppliers think about Amazon, right? Because they definitely have the ability, and they spend a lot of money to get people their garments 2 days, 1 day. And they're definitely diving into clothing, more on the fashion side for people who are jeans and this and that.
Right.
But, I don't know if, a SanMar or whoever is a competitor. They don't really do much B2B type stuff.
Yeah.
But is that something that's been like that, you guys chat about occasionally, or?
Yeah, I like to joke. And we're about to have our annual sales meeting here in I think 3 weeks or so up in Seattle. Every sales meeting I've gone to for the last 10 years, there's a new crop of new reps. They all ask the same 5 questions regarding the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ever going to get into decorating? Obviously they're in the industry now, but when is Under Armour? Are we going to get Under Armour? Or when are they coming in? And then one of them has more recently been, what's the latest with Amazon? How do we see that? And I honestly don't know. I'll get the update in 3 weeks about Marty and Jeremy Lott's perspective. But there again, I think it looks like their model is more stronger competitors with like a Custom Ink, lesser so with competing against a SanMar. And hopefully they're smart enough to understand that. It's taken us 45 years, but I feel like we've got a strong respect earning across the industry, and you can't buy that, you can't optimize that, and you can't fulfill that. It takes time and people shaking hands with you at the shows and talking to you and understanding that you're not a bunch of high-level bean counters, that you're from the industry, you're about the industry, you're listening and responding to the industry, and even a company like Amazon can't replicate that for maybe quite some time.
So where do you think then things are going? And we'll do this for, SanMar's area and for the print shop area, because you work with them as well a lot. Where do you think things are going as far as the distribution side? Like where would you see SanMar or others in the next 5 years?
Well, there's been a consolidation and compression of competition with the group that owns Alpha Broder, Bodick, and such. Mm-hmm. And I listened to a podcast, I believe with Norm Hollinger, and feel like I recall him saying that there's still potential acquisitions down the road. So,
what podcast is that called?
I think I heard an interview of him on Promo Kitchen. I think the Promo Kitchen guys interviewed him. This is maybe a year or so ago, or I think it was right after the Bodick acquisition. So. Mm-hmm. So it could be still some compression there. There's a whole host of smaller regional suppliers that I think are, trying to grow and evolve. I feel like S&S has come up in the wake of a lot of that chaos as well. Mm-hmm. From SanMar's perspective, I think we've got great coverage. I think we've got some big architectural plan things that we're doing, like we're doing a rolling change for our warehouse management system, still a year or two out from completion. That's going to position us better for some of the long-standing things on our list that customers want, new back-end architecture with websites and some other projects. So I think all of that is us, refortifying our foundations, I think is the best way to put that, so that you can, feel comfortable about changing out the furniture and maybe adding on something down the road. Our warehouse distribution network's pretty strong and capable. We're 8 DCs deep now across the country and getting very little parts of the country within one day. So I don't see a new DC in the future. At least I haven't heard anything. But I think others that are more pocketed and regional, I think that would be part of their growth strategy, would be to add additional locations so they can service more parts of the country.
Now, distribution side too. Obviously upgrading systems and things like that, but are there certain things that you could see in, say, 3 to 5 years, whether tech or not, where maybe how people order is different? Are they, because obviously the SanMar have an app or any of the other guys to make it easy to order on the go or quickly like that?
Yeah, we have we started with an app. I think it evolved into an applet, so it's basically just a portal through to a mobile site, and then part of our implementation and change this year will be to have a fully responsive website, so it won't matter what screen you're looking at. The site will be fundamentally the same. Mm-hmm. But I think what technology is teaching us, whether it's the ordering streamline process through Amazon, or I draw upon the example, honestly, of Domino's Pizza. I was referencing them, gosh, it feels like 7 or 8 years ago, where, I would talk about a long, hard week of travel and chatting with folks. And on a Friday evening, I just wanted to get a pizza and veg and chill out. And it was nice not having to pick up the phone and talk to some knucklehead who doesn't quite understand you and get your order wrong as clear as you make it. To punching that in on their fledgling app back then, it's certainly improved since then. So I feel like streamlining the order process is going to continue to evolve for a lot of businesses in the industry. I think the old holdout curmudgeons will, retire or sell off. I listened to one of your podcasts with the folks up in Chicago, something sportswear.
Campus?
Campus Sportswear. That was a quintessential example of, the old guard meeting the new guard, not even the handoff. I mean, they're in business together, which I think is awesome. So I'd love to see more collaborative efforts where you have the older seasoned pro veterans that may be wizards at decorating, meeting the new young bloods that come in with some sales and marketing and process efficiency things.
Less combo.
It's an amazing combination. I'd like to see more of it out there, and I think that will continue to evolve in that direction. But there again, I love this industry because the fundamentals, I think, are always going to be there. Technology will never replace the human-to-human experience that people need in some cases in this industry. Lots of people have tried to do school uniforms, for instance, online. It's a gimme. Well, the fact remains that parents want to touch, feel, and get Billy to try on the, shorts and shirt. And as amazing as your website might be, mom needs a brick and mortar shop to experience that.
Gotcha. Well, what do you think? Well, we'll just get into specifically contract printers because you work with them a lot.
Sure.
What do you think they need to do to continue to be competitive over the next 5 years?
Sure. Day in and day out, and I experience this as a TM as well as talking with contract decorators. Maybe a little bit more amplification with them because it is a skinny margin front end business. But I've met with countless owners that they get mentally bogged down and mentally kind of deadlocked. They got their blinders on, looking just at price. I mean, it's an easy, comparable metric that so many people get focused on. And I think if you take a step back and you somehow break free of that, it's a challenge. I understand. The successful businesses in our industry and outside of our industry, from suppliers to distributors to online and e-commerce, the guys that have done well are not focused on that, on price. They're focused on the service and the experience of the consumer, I would say. And so I think more contract and more businesses in general, they have to truly embrace that, and they need to understand that it may take some investment both in time and money, but that if you can optimize all those other aspects, you'll quickly realize that suddenly price starts to kind of trail back in the list of important needs. If you don't do that and you do keep those blinders on, then your customer, your end consumer, is almost going to mirror your model. My dad is still in this industry, and he has got a lot of information, and thus is a pretty powerful salesperson in a sense, in that when he talks to a new client, he expresses empathy, understanding, casual nature, but a lot of knowledge and help. He's helping the customer. He's often sent people to competitors essentially because they're a better fit for what they're looking for, but sometimes gets them back on the phone when they have a bigger project or something more suited for what he does, because he was a helpful advisor, not a sleazy sales guy. So I think it's so much about the experience and the process that when he's in those conversations, he'll talk to somebody for 30 minutes and feel like they had a good connection and they're going to do business together. Price never even got brought up.
Cool. Well, awesome, Monty. I definitely appreciate it. Maybe a last takeaway. Is there anyone that's interesting that you're following or getting some tips outside of the industry that you like?
Sure. I'm 2 years into daddyhood. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Okay.
So forgive my maybe lack of depth when it comes to people I'm checking out. That's been a wonderful blessing for my wife and I, but taken a lot of time to do some outward exploration. I only got, honestly, and some may be surprised, I'm 39 years old, but I only took a deeper dive on social media maybe just 3-4 years ago. As you mentioned, I created a social media channel primarily focused on Twitter at Apparel Geek. And I did that honestly because I was going and seeing a lot of businesses. And when I was in there showing them product and talking about a lot of times more the application of the product and different ideas and creative ideas, SanMar started empowering all its sales force with decorated samples. And we would have a lot of internal sharing of ideas. But as I got older, I realized I would see my accounts every 6 months, more or less, and I wouldn't remember in those meetings all the cool things I had seen or learned about. So I created the Apparel Geek moniker, if you will, and then in my meetings I would tell customers, hey, if you want to stay in touch with the cool stuff I learn about on the road, and follow me. Sure. Follow me there. And when I'm talking to an owner or a business or somebody, I make sure to always say, hey, is this cool? Can I take a picture? Would you mind me sharing this on social media? So that's been a pleasurable outlet. And then I do try to follow all the mainstay industry standards, from the Baradens to Promo Kitchen, Printavo, M&R, many others out there that I do see are contributing to back and educating the industry.
Cool. Well, yeah, definitely appreciate it, Monty. This has been a really great chat. And again, thank you for the time.
And again, thank you for the opportunity. And I know I've done a couple of Printavo puff pieces here, but I'm being sincere. I think your business model is an example of what the industry does need, which is that next generation push to carry us forward. We can't keep leaning on the old titans, but we can certainly learn from their experience and apply a lot of the next generation, youth and optimism. And I think it's a wonderful fit. So thank you again for the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.